Fluorescents are so hot right now.
Spiky bits.
Welcome back, Hobby Maniacs. I'm Rob Bear from SpikyBits.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Monument Hobbies Pro Acrylic Fluorescents to paint up some movement sticks for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Now, I am going to be using the airbrush, but if you don't have an airbrush and you really want to see how good these fluorescents are, you can just simply watch Monument Hobbies' little tutorial on how to use the fluorescents because they do it all with paintbrush. However, I wanted to use the airbrush to get those really sick fades over a very, very large flat area on all of these templates. So let's jump right into it and see what's good. You can, of course, get your own set from Monument Hobbies, and there you see some of the stuff that they painted up. That was also in the intro. I think their staff painter, Jordan Lamb, painted these guys up, and they are just awesome. So all their paints are right here under the Pro Acrylic Paint tab. You can just search by name or just go to the second page because I think they're on the second page right here. And there's the set right there. It's not even 30 bucks for those paints. Now, you are going to want to pick up a copy of Sky Blue or a bottle of Sky Blue because there is no blue in this. And I'll explain a little bit more about that here in a second. And also, you may want their transparent set that I think is their set number 2. Yep, their set number 2 right here. Now, that isn't even quite $40, but this you'll be able to use for a lot more things than just this project. And I'm actually ashamed that I didn't get this a lot sooner. I actually had a copy of this and gave it away. And then Jason might have gotten a little mad at me about that. But he did send me another one. So thank you, Jason, because you're right. I was wrong. And these things are pretty much amazing. And I haven't stopped using them since. And I'll show you why they're so good here in a second once we get started. So I actually have a confession to make. And I suppose one thing that I should have mentioned a second ago is there is discount codes that you can get to use on their website from Spiky Bits. Fast forward to the end of this video and we have the codes and where they're at the end because I don't know them at the top of my head right now, but I did want to mention that because we were just on their site and I think you can save like 10% on the sets. I did pester the crap out of Jason at Monument Hobbies once he teased that he was doing this because the Marvel Crisis Protocol starter set had just come out and I wanted to try these because I really like his paints. And my first set of them that came out back in 2000, I painted up the movement templates and the range guides, and it was the paints I used, which I'm not going to talk about, weren't Monument Hobbies, and they were really hard to use because they were actually true fluorescents, which is a completely different dynamic in the airbrush and maybe potentially shouldn't be airbrushed. I mean, you can with a lot of work. Mine turned out great, but it was a lot more work than I wanted to do. And I feel like why even use the airbrush at that point? I should have just brushed it all on. So he got me previews of the paints right here. They had pre-mixed all this stuff up while they were getting all their sets together for production. So he actually gave me these way ahead of time because I really wanted to try these out for this stuff. Now, granted, we're months in the past here at this point, however. But I just wanted to mention that he did me a solid and sent these to me, of course. He also sent me a set of the transparents, which I definitely, you're gonna see a lot more of these in this video, which they're amazing to use, and Sky Blue. And the reason I already had Sky Blue. So Sky Blue is important because there is no blue in this set, but it doesn't quite matter because you can buy all this stuff separately, right? So not a big deal. You can just buy it a la carte. Like I said, it doesn't come in this set here. Now this is the production set. He sent me one of these afterwards. You are gonna want to pick this up. And the reason why, there's a bunch of science behind it. I'm not even gonna get into it because it doesn't matter because you probably don't care. But these are not true fluorescents, like I said. So it doesn't actually matter. You're not gonna shine black light over this. It's not a Velvet Elvis poster. You're not going to play in the dark. And if you are on that journey in your hobby, then you probably don't want these paints because you're doing some sort of elaborate display for blacklight and all that stuff. And this isn't going to work for you. This is for like every other use out there, like, you know, cool effects on lightsabers and things like that. AOS Endless Spell, the mirrors, these templates here, anything you want a fire effect on, a glowy effect or anything like that, just for everyday use. And generally, It's the easiest to do this with your airbrush, which I know a lot of you are like, oh God, another airbrush tutorial. I hate airbrushing. I'm never gonna buy one. And that's fine. I respect that. But for those of you that do have it, this will benefit you. Now, like I said, you can just watch the Monument Hobbies ones because they do it all by hand, and it's, you know, it is gonna take longer, but it is doable, and it is produces a very good look. And as a matter of fact, that Age of Sigmar and the spell on the image there, that one, in the intro image, that one was actually painted by hand, and they have a whole tutorial on how they did that. So it's pretty incredible. So long story kind of winding down here, I'm not gonna say short, you are probably gonna want the transparent set, at least the transparent white. You probably are also gonna want the transparent black, and I'll show you why. You're gonna wanna edge all this stuff at the end there. And then also the fluorescent set. So it's gonna put you back a little bit, but then you're gonna be set up to do all of the effects on your miniatures to make them really pop and kind of take them to the next level. This isn't something you're gonna wanna start out with for your miniatures. Just get down the techniques for airbrushing and using the Pro Acrylic system. And then I think from there you can graduate up to this. But I'm kind of at the point in my hobby journey where I want stuff to pop and stuff to get crazy. And that's what we're doing today. The first step, we need to do some pre-shading here to get the fluorescents to pop. Now, in the past, well, pretty much exclusively, I've always used white ink because it's easier to use, you know, and push through the airbrush. But I was talking to Jason, he's like, hey, you should try the transparent white because it works better. And well, obviously he makes it. And I was like, well, I don't know, man, but I gotta tell you, I've been liking it so far. I've been practicing with it off camera, and I'm not a huge fan, and I've had problems with this in the past, and you just saw those flakes come off. This is cool, but it dries around here, and you've got all this flakiness that kicks out, and getting that inside of your airbrush is pretty much a nightmare to clean. So I've had to do that a couple of times in the past, and I wasn't a fan. So hopefully this will be with its the twist top and everything. And remember, all of these paints come with a gasket in here, so they won't dry out. Well, let's just say they'll probably last longer than you might even ever need them to paint your stuff. I've had some of these already 6 years now or so, and I haven't had any issues with them drying out at all. Even with the agitator balls, they just take a licking and keep on ticking. So I'm definitely a fan of that. So let's get to some pre-shade and get rid of all these crusties. So one of the things I like about the transparent whites, or any of the transparents in general, is that you can pretty much just pop them right in the airbrush, and for the most part they are ready to go. So let's see what we got here. Once you get done with all of your pre-shades, you should have something that pretty much looks like this, and that's about 1 to 2 light coats across each of these markers, and then going back with a second pass at the very end, and you know, you should have something very similar. So for this particular one, we're gonna do this a little different. So we've got the sky blue. It isn't technically a fluorescent, but it's still really bright and really poppy. So we're gonna mix that with some white at first, then go back to the sky blue, and then we're gonna mix in some fluorescent or some purple. And what that's gonna do is just kind of be like a darker blue, so to speak. So we're gonna mix that up and have at it. Now we'll start just kind of going around the areas that might be light, but you don't want to always stick to those areas. You want to keep some of the stuff that might be darker, or maybe that has a lot of white on it right now, could still be dark, because the white really is just there just to get a nice base for the fluorescents to go over, really. So we'll just kind of go in and start blocking it out wherever kind of makes sense, you know, to be some energy, or you know, some sort of glowy, some sort of whatnots and things. We just don't quite know until we get in there and start messing with it. And now we'll set up some transitions just with the straight blue itself into some of those areas where we're gonna go a bit darker. This is just gonna take a little bit of time and kind of feeling it out, because we have a little bit of highlights and like pre-shading in here. So it's gonna take a little bit of messing around and just kind of looking and figuring out kind of where you want to go, and some different things, you know, just to get it quite right, to blend everything together. But when we get to the actual fluorescent, that's gonna make a lot more sense, I feel like. So now we'll start pulling everything together with the straight purple. And this will pretty much be the template for how we're going to do all of these together. But with the blue just not even being technically a fluorescent color, I think it's a foundation color or something like that, or I don't know, I'm not a colorologist, but either way. So what this is gonna do is once we start putting it down, it's gonna kind of transition the darker areas into like a spacey blue, kind of like that in the corner. And then it's gonna, where we go over the blue, it'll just darken the blue altogether and make it like kind of stormy and such. So we'll just get in there and kind of mess with it some and just see exactly if it's quite what we want, or maybe we need to add a little bit more blue to it. I'm not quite sure yet. So I think we learned something there. So we were using a color, or the blue that isn't fluorescent, like I said at the beginning. And that one was a little tricky because I think perhaps we started with sky blue, and perhaps really what we should have done is just gone with the normal blue, because there wasn't enough separation of color like we should have seen. But with that being said, the blue is the only one that isn't technically a new fluorescent paint, so a little bit of a question mark on this whole project. Now this, of course, you can see the different colors here because I went back and I lightened it up a little bit more to get it more towards brighter than this. So we kind of used some colors that didn't quite exist here, but I think if we had started with this and then, or started with the sky blue rather over the white, and then transition to this guy and then to the purple, I think it would have turned out well. But that being said, I'm happy with where this is at, with the kind of like what I was trying to say, with all the kind of randomness and splotchiness, and you can see it's just basically like some cosmic energy going on right here. But all of this is going to change when we go back and we block in the raised surfaces with a black paint, because then the tonality of the whole project basically shifts, and you don't focus as much on these colors because you have that contrast, much like it looks completely different over this black background right here. So the other ones, we're not going to spend as much time on, I don't think, because now you've had the fundamentals of kind of how to achieve this right here, and we'll talk more about the color theory and kind of where to go from there. For this one, we're just going to use the straight yellow fluorescent. We'll start back here and just kind of go darker towards the top and kind of on the sides, because that's generally how fire works, and that's what we're going to do with this one. Next up, we're going with more of a 50-50 mix, I guess. Something that looks pastel orange, so we combine the orange with the yellow there. And now we're just gonna keep working our way up and maybe hit some of the sides right here, I think. Now I'll switch over to just a straight orange, which is probably going to be a little strong. And we're just going to work it in on the edges, kind of where we just went with the mix we did. And up here towards the top, I'm going to make it a little darker. Maybe any spot we want it to be a little darker, like in here, the side cuts maybe. Then to finish off the effect, we're gonna go right here with the red, which I just realized looking up at the camera that none of this stuff actually is showing up right. This is a very solid base coat of yellow right here, and in this video it looks really washed out. So I guess that's just the fluorescence playing with the video a bit, because all of this is a really good gradient here. Now you can see that there is some differentiation of color down here towards the end, But unfortunately, I guess when you see the still pictures of this, you'll see, hey, this actually was painted well. But I imagine this red here is gonna be really and still get caught in the camera. And we're just gonna lightly hit some spots there. So yeah, you can see it's really starting to turn and it's really making this orange. Again, it's really hard to see in the camera, but it's turning that orange into like hot fire at the corners, and then we'll work it into some of the spots up here and such. So I went back and cleaned it up a little bit. Again, you can't really see it here because the yellow isn't popping in the camera, but it's all pretty well faded all the way through with a little bit of yellow going up into this area here to kind of play around with it. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Now we're gonna keep the yellow in the airbrush and jump to the next color. For the number 2 one, we're gonna harness our best Xbox Life memories here and hit this with some yellow in the middle, and then probably the dots, just depending on how it looks, just to get it really bright here in the center. And then we'll come in with the green and probably a blue too at the very tips, just to lighten it up. Next up, we're gonna use the red to paint this, and we're gonna start in the center and kind of expand it out and get, I think we're gonna get darker because we're gonna get a purple and then I think yellow. I'm still thinking about it. I gotta consult the rainbow. Okay, next up is purple. So we're just gonna try to go in the cracks to where we had darker paint already. So I looked at the rainbow and decided that I was gonna go with orange instead of yellow, because I think if we aim it right on top of those middle areas, we're gonna get a nice little color transition. I think orange was closer to violet, so I think it's gonna look better. It just kind of intensifies things, but it looks good. Well, I had to rack my brain for a minute because it just wasn't quite turning out how I wanted it. And then I remembered that red and white make pink, and that's kind of what I wanted in the middle, but you can't go back to pink once you've gone this dark here. So I was like, well, maybe I can just hit it with some white and bring it back. And that's, I think, what we're gonna do. So in the end, this turned out just fine once we hit it with the matte coat, and you can see it just kind of blended everything together, and there really isn't any noticeable degradations or different degrees in the fades right here. And I think, personally, I think it looks pretty good. So I'm super happy with this. Now we're gonna go in and block out the black areas here. And I won't bore you, with all the details on it, but I do want to talk about a couple points real quick. I like using synthetic brushes to do this. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to use, the natural, the Klinsky Sables and all that. I like using those for washes. I might be a weirdo, but it is what it is. And also, speaking about being a weirdo when it comes to painting, Monument's got the coal black, the pro acrylic primer, the black stuff, which comes in a bigger bottle. So in theory, I should probably use that. What I'm actually going to use is the transparent black, which is a much thinner black. And we actually use these for airbrushing today in this project. And I think what's good about this is it's nice thin layers or thin coats of paint that you can put on here. It's controllable, and they actually have a wash medium too, which I don't use quite as much because I'm kind of set in my ways there. But they do have a wash medium that you could put in here, a glazing and washing medium, which is this, that you could mix into this to make it even thinner, and maybe that's even what they use on this. I don't really know, but I'm just gonna go with this thinner paint right here and use it. Make sure I didn't get any on my hands because I don't want a big black thumbprint on here. But we're just gonna start the kind of methodical process of going in here and, you know, just kind of going over all the larger flat areas here. And it helps, you know, you can stabilize with your fingers, you can stabilize on here, but either way, you just want to get into a really good rhythm. It looks like this might actually require 2 coats. So I'm going to do a little test area here and then figure out if I want to stick with this or if I want to darken it up with their other, with that coal black maybe. So I ended up switching to adding about a couple drops of the normal coal paint in here, along with the rest in transparent black. And you can see it coats really well. And it's nice and smooth. And I think it'll do 1 coat, no problem, over most of these colors. The problem is that the colors are so bright. So even if we do have to do a multiple coat situation right here, I don't feel like it's gonna be that big of a deal because this goes over pretty well. So we're just gonna wait and see. Now you can see that's continuing to dry that we just did a minute or 2 ago. So maybe adding in a little bit more of the transparent black would be good for going around corners and places where you kind of want to make sure you get, you know, kind of get a full spread. But for these bigger flat areas, I definitely think you're going to want to have a little bit more coal black on there to keep it from streaking, but also to get really good coverage. So when you're painting, the basic technique is that you're going to use the side of the brush to get paint on the edges here, so you don't hopefully get on any of the, you know, airbrushed areas there, and then use the flat also to kind of fill in around all these flat areas right here and kind of outline it. And if you hold it one way and get all the angles like this on one side, you only have to turn it once in each direction to get all those lined areas done. Once you start outlining all your areas and then blocking it in, it starts to go pretty quick at that point. Another good tip is to always pull towards you so that you have more control with your brush as you're blocking in the lines and things. And I would definitely recommend doing all of the edges, even the ones on the sides that have black areas already from the primer, because those areas are more prone to damage. So if you get a nice thick coat on there after we go through and we seal this back up, then it will definitely be something that protects it a little bit more on this kind of high risk areas, and then back here as well on this lip, because this kind of free cuts into space right there. If you make a mistake, you can always go in with a little wet paper towel, and hopefully you catch it quick enough and you can just wipe it away, like what happened on the back of this marker right here. But sometimes you might just get a random dot, you know, on a spot, and it's gonna be almost impossible to match. So you might as well just kind of leave it, you know. If you notice it, you notice it. If not, you know, it's whatever. I can barely even see it looking down at it in here, and I don't even see it on the camera. So to me, that little dot right there, if you can even see it, is kind of a non-factor. For the movement sticks right here, I basically just did the same recipe as I did on the number 5 that I think turned out pretty well. I mean, there's a little bit of overspray, but I wasn't gonna spend a whole lot of time on this. I mean, I've seen people that create like comic book scenes on these and they're dope, but I just, I don't have that kind of time to put into this project. But I'm pretty happy with how this particular stuff turned out here. And then when we take a look at the sticks themselves, all trimmed out with all the black lined and panel lined areas here, again, I'm super happy with this and how these turned out. And it's not very hard to do. Now, in between each one of these, I would hit it with a little bit of normal Testors dull coat or spray sealer from Testors. Now this stuff is great. You've probably heard me talk about it before in the past. I love this stuff because it isn't affected by humidity. Now apparently this has a particular smell. I don't know the smell, but I've heard One of these smells like bananas, and that's the one you want to use that isn't affected by humidity, but I don't know that for sure because I have no smell buds, sadly. However, you can get this stuff at Hobby Lobby or Michael's. It's the Testors brand. Of course, I've ripped mine here. And another good thing to remember is always put what a version of it, like this is my dull coat, on here, and I'll show you why. Because sometimes when you get these caps off, everything starts looking the same, you just start spraying stuff. This is the Model Masters gloss. And what I do with this is, after this dries for a day, I'll hit it with a gloss, and the gloss actually kind of candies it up and gives it a little bit of a hard protective shell to it. And then once that dries the next day, because these are going to see a lot of beat and, you know, wear and tear when they're in your box, and you know, you pull them out and then you're like measuring stuff on the table, and they're just going to get beat up. So you want to give them lots of protection. So hit them with this and then come back and hit them with another coat, a dull coat, a day later. So it's a little bit of a process, and I know it's not for everybody, but for me it works just fine. And I've played a lot of games with these, and as you can see already, well, they're still pretty good. So I'm really happy with this right here. So overall, I think these Monument Hobbies colors, once you add in that sky blue, is really great for fluorescents. Now, again, they're not true fluorescents. You know, if you have a black light, they're not gonna shine and all that, and they're not gonna glow in the dark, but who cares? Like, who's playing games in the dark for real? I guess if you're going to a competition or doing some sort of display, then yeah, maybe this stuff isn't for you and you want a true fluorescent, but they're a lot harder to work with, believe me. I've used them before in the past. Actually, I used them on my first set of Marvel Crisis Protocol templates, and it was just a bear to work with, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But you know, sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze for your display, and maybe that's what you want out of your hobby journey. So that is it for this one here. Thank you very much for watching our how-to tutorial on using these cool new fluorescent colors from Monument Hobbies, plus of course the sky blue, which I definitely think is worth a pickup, and the transparent white. Actually, just get the whole transparent set because they are totally worth it, and you will use them for all sorts of things. I mean, from washes to just spraying down base coats to applying, you know, the black lining and things on here, which we did after we airbrushed everything. I just can't say enough good things about these transparent whites, and I'm kicking myself for not getting them sooner. I think it was the most recent purchase after all the other paint sets from Monument Hobbies. A matter of fact, he sent me a set and I gave them away back when I used to do live Twitch streaming, and he's like, "You're gonna be sorry for that." And I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know how to use it. Make somebody else happy." And lo and behold, later on, I'm like, "Oh my God, these are the best things in the history of ever that I've used," and I'm going to continue using these, and probably never ever use this stuff here, because this stuff is just way too hard to work with, and the chances of it messing up my airbrush are just infinitesimally high, unfortunately. So we're just not going to do that. So don't forget to head over to Monument Hobbies and pick up your sets of fluorescent paints, and also maybe the transparents, and of course a sky blue on the side.